to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore. And today we're joined by Kyle Grice from the Little Lost Bookshop in Katoomba. And Kyle is also behind the Wandering Bookseller. G'day, Kyle. Nice to have you with us.
Hello.
In episode 31 of the Hope Book Club, we have been reading some non-fiction. Natasha has been reading Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation by Kristin Kobez de May. This book explores the forces that turned Donald Trump into the hero of the religious right. Kyle Grice has been reading Bill Bailey's Remarkable Guide to Happiness. It's a collection of meditative and thoughtful essays to help you enjoy life more. And I've been reading Steve Biddulph's excellent parenting book, Raising Girls in the 21st Century, a much-needed antidote to all that's wrong with modern family life. Plus, we'll talk about the influence of books on our real lives. But first, let's hear from Jesus and John Wayne by Kristin Kobez de May.
The products Christians consume shape the faith they inhabit. Today, what it means to be a conservative evangelical is as much about culture as it is about theology. This is readily apparent in the heroes they celebrate. Establishment evangelicals might count Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield among their eminent forebearers, but evangelical popular culture is teeming with a different ensemble of heroes. Men like William Wallace, as brought to life by Mel Gibson, Teddy Roosevelt, the mythic American cowboy, Generals Douglas MacArthur and George S. Patton, and the ordinary American soldier, and the actor John Wayne. As the on-screen embodiment of the heroic cowboy and idealised American soldier, and also as an outspoken conservative activist in real life, John Wayne became an icon of rugged American manhood for generations of conservatives. Pat Buchanan parroted Wayne in his presidential bid. Newt Gingrich called Wayne's Sands of Iwo Jima the formative movie of my life, and Oliver North echoed slogans from that film in his 1994 Senate campaign. In time, Wayne would also emerge as an icon of Christian masculinity. Evangelicals admired and still admire him for his toughness and his swagger. He protected the weak, and he wouldn't let anything get in the way of his pursuit of justice and order. Wayne was not an evangelical Christian, despite rumours to this effect regularly circulated by evangelicals themselves. He did not live a moral life by the standards of traditional Christian virtue. Yet, for many evangelicals, Wayne would come to symbolise a different set of virtues, a nostalgic yearning for a mythical Christian America, a return to traditional gender roles, and the reassertion of white patriarchal authority.
That was from Jesus and John Wayne by Kristin Kobez de May. Sitting here in Australia, it can be hard to understand why American Christians have been so zealously supportive of Donald Trump. He hasn't ever demonstrated an understanding of the Bible or a practical commitment to faith in Jesus. So why have evangelical Christians been his biggest supporters? Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation by Kristin Kobez de May seeks to answer the question of how the history of evangelicalism in the US paved the way for Trump to become the hero of the religious right. So, Natasha, the title, Jesus and John Wayne, it kind of says it all, but can you maybe explain a bit more about the premise behind that title?
Yeah, it does kind of say it all, doesn't it? I think it's a great title, particularly because it sums up, this book is partly about Christian nationalism, which is a term we're using more and more, particularly in the wake of the insurrection on January 6th in the US. And on the other hand, a kind of militant masculinity, like a kind of stand up and be a tough guy ethic, and how those two things have been connected over the past 70 years. And John Wayne kind of represents a lot of how that all crystallizes, in that John Wayne, not really Christian person, not really lived a Christian ethic, but a lot of Christian men, and a lot of Christian subculture has loved him as kind of a stand up and fight all American guy, the cowboy. And that actually that represents a lot of the contradictions that people have been trying to tease out ever since kind of 2015, 2016, and the evangelical support for Donald Trump, who does not seem like the kind of moral, upright Christian character that you'd think followers of Jesus would want to support in politics. So a lot of people have been trying to explain that and dig into that for the last few years with varying rates of success. Jesus and John Wayne is not a book specifically about Donald Trump or specifically about that conundrum, but it does give a lot of history and background to, well, why is it that, 81% of evangelicals, of white evangelicals, not only voted for Donald Trump, but, there was a lot of talk of, people kind of cared about the policies and kind of held their noses and voted for this guy that they weren't that big a fan of, but, they thought it was the better option for the country. Whereas actually, that doesn't seem to have held true, that people are not just kind of, he's the lesser of two evils, but have been really, they've really adored him and supported him through thick and thin. This goes a long way to going, okay, this is in keeping, this is not out of nowhere, this is in keeping with a lot of what's happened since World War II in this particular subculture.
And so what did you learn about how American Christianity came to be associated with this particular form of, rugged masculinity?
So a lot of it has, I found really illuminating the historical stuff about partly the Cold War, and this idea of having a very specific enemy, and that the way that you rally people together is by having a common enemy a lot of the time. So what happens if you decide to kind of stoke the politics of fear? And so during the Cold War, it was a lot around communism as the enemy. And according to Kobez, you see this particular kind of strand of evangelical culture faltering a bit in the 1990s because, the Cold War is over. Reagan was in power throughout the 80s. It was kind of like, maybe we're okay. Maybe we don't have this same sense of embattlement. And then in 2001, with 9/11, having a new kind of foreign enemy with the idea of the war on terror to kind of rally the troops. So I think the ways that fear and a sense of being under siege has really fed, what has brought people together and motivated them to kind of stand up and be politically active. She shows how that's been really effective, but in the sense of has gotten people worked up, but whether the outcomes of that have been what they would have hoped or wanted is a more challenging question.
And what does she have to say about the role of, popular Christian culture in American evangelicalism?
Like here in Australia, we don't have the same sort of, in America, there's that a much stronger kind of culture of what a certain type of masculinity looks like, and the Second Amendment and guns and being tough and hunting and all this stuff that we have like a little bit of, I think, from the US. And a homegrown version, but it's not to nearly the same extent. But I did, having been part of a youth group for part of my teenage years, during a lot of the period that she looks at, I'm like, some of these names are familiar to me. Like I've listened to some of these people and read some of these people. And so I had that feeling of like, I've seen kind of pockets of this, but it's almost as though she kind of drains the water away and you see how all the mountain peaks are connected underneath and what's been driving all of those and what they lead to. And so I found that kind of fascinating and also kind of horrifying because a lot of it is, stuff that Christian people in particular, if they hold to certain values, and particularly if they, look at the Jesus of the Gospels, who is not this warrior Christ, not this John Wayne figure that a lot of people in this movement kind of wanted him to be, it's actually quite distressing.
Well, I was thinking particularly about how this relates to women. Jesus was so radical towards women and he treated them with so much respect. So did she touch at all on, why the women go along with this sort of macho culture?
Yeah, very much so. So a lot of A lot of this is to do with traditional gender roles. That's been a very significant emphasis in this movement, according to this writer. I mean, there's an early section where she talks about some of the sort of the backlash against like second wave feminism in kind of the 60s, 70s and 80s. And some of the women who are appealing to these housewives who might be like quite dissatisfied in their marriages, but who really don't have the means or the desire to kind of go out and follow the radical feminists and their kind of prescription for having a different sort of life. And that therefore for them, this whole kind of crop of books and courses and like preaching programs that kind of say, actually, you should double down on being like the perfect wife, on like being available to your husband in every way and catering to his every need and treating him like a king, and he's kind of in charge and this is what he wants from you, that was sort of a more realistic option for them if they wanted their marriages to get better than the program that the radical feminists were offering them. Like, this all sounds very grim, right? There's some really interesting and sometimes hilarious kind of parts of the book. So there's, I hadn't heard of this woman, Maribel Morgan, but she in the 1970s started running these total woman courses and wrote a book about it and everything. And she kind of went, the solution to resentment in marriage is like submission and treating your husband like a king. And she'd give them these kind of tasks. And apparently in 1972, 12 wives of the Miami Dolphins, like the football players, attended one of these classes. And the next season, the Dolphins won every single game, which had never happened before in NFL history. And so, you know, she didn't, Kobez to me says, you know, she didn't take credit, but just in case several other football teams requested the course for their players' wives as well. So you get these kind of little tidbits where you're like, oh my goodness, but also fascinating, but also in some ways horrifying.
So look, just to wrap up, does this read as a history book or is it a political work? Like, would people from both left and right-leaning inclinations be able to enjoy it?
It's a good question. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a polemic. Some people who strongly disagree with its thesis might experience it that way. She, you know, cites her sources. She is really trying to contribute a work of scholarship that is also people can read at a popular level. That means that, you know, it's not a million pages long. So there were things where I was like, I'm going to have to take your word for this without going and doing all the background reading myself. So, you know, not everyone will agree with it, but there's been a lot of talk about it as being, you know, one of the most important works on evangelicalism as a movement and what it is, what it means, like since the Second World War. So I think even if you're going to hate it, even if you disagree with the thesis, even if it's really confronting for you, probably if this is something that you're interested in, it's going to be an important read.
Mm-hmm. And does she touch at all on how we can find a way forward or mend the polarization that's resulted from all this?
Very briefly. I feel like that's not her task in this. Like, she's trying to kind of sketch how did we get here? And she does often a note of hope at the end about, you know, this isn't the only option. And you have notes throughout of like, this isn't all Christians, it's not all American evangelicals who have been kind of sucked into this kind of narrative. But she's telling a particular story and you might have to look elsewhere for what comes next.
Now, Carl, your turn. So you have been reading Bill Bailey's book. It's called Bill Bailey's Remarkable Guide to Happiness. What made you pick this one up, Carl?
I've always loved Bill, particularly from back when he was on Black Books. And even his stand-up comedy is brilliant.
What's Black Books? I haven't heard of that.
Black Books is a British sitcom about a secondhand bookshop where they don't really like the customers. They sort of shoo them out the door almost as soon as they arrive. Well worth watching. I think that's how Bill became famous. But he's definitely stands on his own apart from the TV show. He's an amazing, funny man.
So where does this fit in with the pandemic? Obviously, this book came out towards the end of last year. Was it written through the pandemic?
Yeah, this is what Bill did when he was in lockdown. He decided to write down all his happy moments from life. It's not an instruction book by any means. It's mostly his stories of moments of happiness. But he's hoping that we might somehow smile or share some of that joy, I guess.
What did you like about this? Did it make you happy to read it?
It did. There are unexpected things. There are things you might expect, like listening to music or spending time outdoors, decluttering your house. But there are unexpected moments of happiness for Bill, like swearing, playing mini golf, or singing in church. I didn't see that one coming. So
Okay. So does he give any sense to, what is the secret to joy and contentment, or is it just about finding happiness in those little moments?
He often has studies that sort of he's gone and found all this obscure research to explain why these strange little things in life create happiness. So he found a study from Keele University that showed that if people put their hands in really cold, icy cold water, that swearing helps them with the pain reduction. And say for singing, he finds it improves your posture and improves your breathing and your muscle tension, and even gives you an endorphin rush. Even if it's a melancholy song, you can sing Leonard Cohen and still feel happy. And so he sort of has the stats to back it up, but I don't know where he finds these studies, because I don't know how somebody funds this kind of research. So,
well, everyone wants to know how to be happy. I think that's really the main question is, has it had any lasting impact? Did it help you to be happier?
I think it did. I mean, and I think it's the sort of thing I'll pick up and dip into again. I definitely spent more time outdoors after reading it. I'm not inclined to spend time outdoors, but I live up in the beautiful Blue Mountains National Park. So I think I've rediscovered what's right on my doorstep, which is a wonderful source of happiness.
So would you recommend it, and who do you think would enjoy it?
If the pandemic has got you feeling a bit down, I think definitely give it a shot, and maybe Bill's book is the trick to happiness. At least for a half an hour or so before the next crisis.
Yeah, we've definitely been rolling from one crisis to the next since last year. So it can't hurt to spend a bit of time in something that makes you feel good. Well, look, normally when we read nonfiction, we are hoping to learn something. But I guess I'm asking the question, do the books we read actually impact us in any way? So what I want to know is, when have you changed something in your life as the result of a book? Natasha, have you got one?
Sorry, just realized I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I really want to say the books change my life all the time, but it's hard to think of specifics, isn't it? So I could think of, okay, here's two that I don't know if they count. One is I recently read The Undoing, which was, I mean, that's the name of the TV show, but the book was called something different, but then they brought out a copy of it that was tied with the TV show. So towards the end of that novel, the main character cooks this dish called chicken marbella, which I'd never heard of. And they also get takeaway of, like, there's some restaurant that makes it and it's the best. And she's like trying to figure out what did they put in it? What ingredient is different, that their chicken marbella is so much better than my chicken marbella. And I was like, what is chicken marbella? Which apparently is an actual dish that lots of people make, but I had never heard of. And I was actually hosting book club where we were doing The Undoing. And so I was like, okay, well, obviously I need to make chicken marbella. So I did. And it was pretty good. I'm not the best cook, but it was pretty good. And then the other one that strikes me, but this is unconfirmed as yet, is that the Ferrante novels, the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante, my brilliant friend and the rest. After reading those, my besties and I were like, well, we need to go to Naples for our 40th birthday, which is probably a terrible idea because I'm not sure Naples is like that nice, and particularly in the novels it's not that nice, like it's quite grim. So we may or may not do that, but it made us want to.
I think you could pick nicer parts of Italy, than
Let's
Naples,
say 40th in Italy,
but
not
yeah,
there yet.
Look, it's funny you said food, because you remember after reading the Rosie Project how then they were going to bring out like a Don Tillman recipe cookbook?
That's right, because he has that meal plan.
He has the standardized meal system.
Yeah.
So but for me, one of mine was actually food related too, because I was reading the number one Lady Detective Agency series, and she's always drinking her red bush tea. And after just hearing her boil the kettle so many times and her and Mama Cootsie putting on the kettle for their red bush tea. I was like, what is this red bush tea? I need to try this. And it turned out it's actually rooibos tea. And I think when I first read those books, it's probably 15, could be maybe even 20 years ago, I got into drinking rooibos tea, which I still do.
Our stomachs are very suggestible. How about you, Carl?
They really are.
I think the book that really shaped a lot of my life has probably been Cloud Street by Tim Winton. I didn't realize this till afterwards, but there's two families that live in a house together. And somehow I think my life has then followed that trajectory and been full of co-housing and share housing and sometimes felt a bit like John Birmingham's, he died with a fluffle in his hand, or it's just that chronic misadventure of living with all sorts of strange people. And I think Cloud Street really maybe set me up for that, because you have these two really unusual families forced to live together, and then the kids grow up and it's a house full of people and they're all different and none of them really get on, but somehow they make it work.
Because the house is kind of a character in that book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Cloud Street would make me want to live with lots of people, but
unintentional habit formation.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I did have a more serious one too from the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, which really informed my approach to restorative justice. And so at the time I was studying international relations, so I was thinking about some of these issues anyway. And then the way Mara Motzway applies justice everywhere she goes, I found very inspiring. And it flowed out to use it in my parenting, where I no longer used a punitive approach in parenting, but went straight to restorative justice. How can we make right what's been wrong? And then you don't really have a need to punish anyone because you've set everything back to right. So, yeah. So on the parenting topic, I've also been reading Steve Biddulph's Raising Girls in the 21st Century. And I listened to this on audiobook, and I would reckon I would probably listen to it almost every year from now on because I found it so helpful. And I think for me, like a lot of the stuff about parenting younger girls, I knew, and I felt like there wasn't anything too surprising in there. But what it really helped me understand is what we are up against trying to do parenting in this day and age, in the sense that time is the missing ingredient with our teenagers. So girls 50 years ago apparently had 5 times as much time with adults as what girls today do. So they're spending way less time interacting with adults, and they're spending most of their time on technology or interacting with peers through technology. So while they're at home, they're on their screens or on their devices, and they're not really doing things. It's also because parents are working, obviously. Both parents are working, so they're just not around as much. But they also have so much time that is scheduled, so they just don't have time hanging out.
I assume it's not a doom and gloom book, though. It's easy to get kind of terrified about, have smartphones destroyed a generation.
No, it's not. But it is a wake-up.
Sexualization of girls, and there are so many things to worry about. But presumably, if it's a parenting book, he has hope, right?
Well, I think the thing is that all those issues are issues that we're all facing all the time anyway, and there aren't any really easy answers, but it's more about how you deal with things and the attitude you bring to the conversations that you have, and the importance of your daughter being heard and you respecting their views and keeping conversations focused on the issue at hand and just acknowledging what they say. I guess what helped me is that it kind of helps you separate out the normal kind of everyday issues with teenagers from the really serious issues that need attention. So, it's overwhelming if you think about, I've got these 20 different issues we're dealing with. And then you kind of go, that's kind of normal, that's kind of normal, that's kind of normal. And these are the ones that we really need to intervene. Yeah. So I found it really helpful in that way.
You have girls, don't you, Carl?
Yes. 3 of them. Yes. They're not, they do play Minecraft. That would be their main, main technology use.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I probably should, but they love it.
Maybe this book is,
I think the thing is, Cole, I had a daughter who didn't have any hardly screen time at all and just read books all the time. And then suddenly they go to high school and they get a laptop.
Yes.
And it's all over, even their reading is through a screen, their drawing is using a screen, everything they do is on a screen. And so you are just, when your kids got their face in a book, you're kind of blocked out of their world too, in a way. But you usually feel that they're quite safe where they are, in that book.
Yes.
Whereas you don't necessarily feel that when they're on a screen. You don't know if they're safe or they're not safe. So it's like you're living this hyper alert, kind of state. So anyway, I found it helpful and I highly recommend it, particularly the audiobook. I think for non-fiction of that nature, it's much easier to listen to than it is to sit down and read.
Soothing voice.
Definitely. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Look, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Hope Book Club or you want to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. bookclub@hopemedia.com.au or text in 0448 40 20 20. In this episode, we have reviewed Jesus and John Wayne by Kristin Kobez de May, Bill Bailey's Remarkable Guide to Happiness, and Raising Girls in the 21st Century by Steve Biddulph. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with a book.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.